Remember to engage with this content, share your reflections below, and follow for more heartwarming tales. That Wednesday began like countless others before it wrapped in the familiar quietude that had settled over my days since Harold departed, and our children made their own paths in distant cities. I'm Eleanor, simply a woman nurturing her modest collection of remembrances and petunias in this peaceful neighborhood circle. The morning sun performed its enchanting dance through my dining room window, creating tiny prisms in the vapor curling from my third cup of tea. I'd been procrastinating about organizing the chaotic bookcase in my study, a project delayed for nearly 8 months, and had finally summoned the courage to face that dusty undertaking. Then came the gentle chime of my doorbell. Unexpected callers were rare in my world. Perhaps a package delivery, occasionally my neighbor Patricia seeking to borrow some flour or share fresh community news. A small wave of intrigue washed over me as I dried my palms on my kitchen towel and made my way to the entrance. Through the small window, I glimpsed a young gentleman on my doorstep, a volume pressed against his side. Recognition dawned slowly, tall and lean, with that distinctive mess of auburn curls that never seemed tameable. This was Nathan, Margaret and David's son from the house beside mine. How time had flown. He couldn't still be that little boy, could he? He must be approaching 30 now. I hadn't encountered him much since his departure for university. Opening the door, he pulled open the door, warmth already spreading across my face. Nathan, what a delightful surprise. Please, come inside. His bashful grin created gentle lines around those striking green eyes, Margaret's eyes, unmistakably. Hello, Mrs. Patterson. I hope I'm not intruding. Absolutely not, dear. I was merely preparing myself for combat with an avalanche of literature. What brings you here today? I stepped aside, welcoming him into my hallway, where the familiar blend of aged paper and lavender oil, my home's signature essence, seemed to embrace him. Mother requested I return this, he explained, extending the book toward me. It was a treasured, well-worn edition of Pride and Prejudice, one I frequently shared with neighbors. She completed it recently, though you understand how Mother becomes distracted. I chuckled softly. Margaret was a lovely soul, but concentration wasn't among her greatest strengths. That she certainly does. Thank you, Nathan. Would you care to join me briefly? I've just prepared fresh tea, or perhaps some lemonade if you prefer. It's growing quite warm outside. The invitation escaped before I'd fully considered it, merely the instinctive response of gracious hospitality. Tea time paused momentarily, just enough for me to anticipate a polite refusal. Tea sounds wonderful actually, if it's not an inconvenience. No inconvenience whatsoever, I assured him, guiding him toward my kitchen. Please, make yourself comfortable. My kitchen featured cheerful cream walls, perhaps overcrowded with containers and cookbooks, plus a window overlooking my bird sanctuary, currently entertaining a rather vocal cardinal. Nathan settled into his chair, placing the Austen classic gently upon my floral tablecloth. He appeared somewhat displaced in my warm, traditional kitchen, wearing casual khakis and a button-down shirt, yet there was a natural ease about him as well. How have you been, Nathan? I inquired, while preparing his cup, the rich fragrance permeating the space. Last I learned, you were employed somewhere urban, some technology position? He accepted the cup gratefully. Yes, systems analysis. It's engaging work, keeps me occupied. He sampled the tea. This is excellent tea, Mrs. Patterson. Please call me Eleanor, dear. Mrs. Patterson makes me feel positively ancient, I said with gentle laughter. The secret ingredient is a touch of vanilla in the leaves. A genuine smile transformed his previously serious demeanor. Eleanor then. Vanilla, I'll need to remember that technique. His attention wandered around my kitchen, pausing on the photographs displayed on my bulletin board, images of my children through various stages, Harold and myself during a memorable seaside holiday years past. It feels welcoming here. Reminds me of my grandmother's kitchen, he observed. That simple remark, so heartfelt, stirred something deep within me. My own grandmother's kitchen had been a sanctuary of warmth and comforting aromas. Thank you, Nathan. That's truly kind of you to say. We shared a peaceful moment of silence, accompanied only by the rhythmic ticking of my hallway clock and the distant buzz of garden work. I noticed his hands then, wrapped around the teacup, long, capable fingers, no longer the soft hands of youth. There were slight pencil marks on his thumb, suggesting recent writing. Discussing literature. Did you enjoy the novel? I asked, nodding. toward Pride and Prejudice. It seemed like safe, neutral ground for conversation. His expression brightened. I actually revisited several chapters after Mother finished. It's been years since I read it, still remarkably insightful. It truly endures, I agreed. Elizabeth Bennet was always an inspiration to me. For me as well, he said, his voice growing softer. She makes you consider things about standing firm in your convictions, even when it's challenging. He met my gaze directly, those green eyes, surprisingly intense. There aren't many Elizabeth Bennets in today's world, are there? His question, so direct and tinged with melancholy, caught me unprepared. This wasn't the sort of discussion you anticipated from your neighbor's son making a simple book return. It was the kind of inquiry that typically emerged during intimate conversations with dear friends, or during those searching hours of introspection. The first ripple that, I suppose, was the initial tremor, the first indication that this wouldn't remain merely polite, surface-level conversation. The atmosphere in my sunny kitchen suddenly felt more substantial, charged with unspoken possibilities, and I discovered myself leaning closer, genuinely curious about his next words. What followed? That thoughtful question truly did catch me off guard. He didn't pause for my response, not exactly. It was more a reflection voiced aloud as he traced the edge of his teacup with a fingertip. I mean, he continued, a slight crease forming across his brow. Everyone seems so quick to criticize, so vocal with their judgments, but how many are truly willing to defend their principles? To genuinely listen? It feels like a disappearing skill. I found myself nodding slowly. I understand completely, Nathan. The world seems more cacophonous, somehow, than it once was, and not necessarily beneficially. The noisy world he thought of, the constant bombardment of headlines, the endless debates on digital platforms that even I, a reluctant participant, couldn't entirely avoid. Precisely, he said, appearing relieved by my understanding. I work in technology, supposedly all about connectivity linking people globally, but sometimes I believe we've simply discovered more efficient ways to misinterpret each other, faster and louder than ever. He offered a brief, somewhat rueful laugh. Forgive me, I didn't intend to become so philosophical. It's just something weighing on my mind recently. Please don't apologize, I said sincerely. It's actually quite refreshing. How often do I engage in conversations like this anymore? My friends and I typically discussed our gardens, our grandchildren, recent health concerns, important matters, certainly, life's essentials, but rarely this kind of searching dialogue. An old soul. It's a thoughtful observation, and somewhat surprising coming from someone your age, if you'll forgive my saying so. I tend to associate that kind of world weariness with those of us who've lived longer. He smiled, a genuine, almost youthful expression this time. Perhaps I'm simply an old spirit, or maybe it's the literature. Mother always said I buried myself in books from the moment I learned to read. Yours included, he added, gesturing toward the Austen novel. This one, 1984, Brave New World. They encourage deep thinking. They certainly do, I murmured, my thoughts drifting to my own dusty shelves in the study, silent witnesses to a lifetime of seeking wisdom through stories. It's interesting you mentioned Brave New World. I was just considering rereading that. It feels increasingly relevant these days, doesn't it? The concept of knowledge being threatening, of people voluntarily surrendering their right to think independently. Brave New World. Nathan's eyes brightened with recognition. Absolutely. The way Huxley describes why deep thinking had to be discouraged, it's unsettling because you can recognize elements of it occurring now. People selecting comfortable entertainment over anything that challenges them. He leaned forward slightly, his earlier reserve completely abandoned, replaced by animated enthusiasm. I actually attempted to discuss it with colleagues recently, and they stared at me as if I'd grown another head. They were more interested in the latest action film or trending video clip. I felt a pang of familiar recognition, not because I frequently debated dystopian literature with my contemporaries, but because I knew that sensation of holding thoughts or passions that didn't quite align with those around you. It can be difficult to find people willing to explore ideas more deeply, I acknowledged. Exactly, he said, then glanced down at his cup, a flicker of that earlier uncertainty returning. Well, thank you for allowing me to ramble. Not rambling, Nathan, I said gently. That wasn't rambling. That was genuine conversation, and a fascinating one at that. I refreshed his tea, and then my own. The afternoon sun had shifted, casting longer shadows across my kitchen floor. The cardinal had departed, replaced by a pair of chirping finches. Tell me, what else have you been reading or contemplating? It was a simple invitation, but it felt like opening a door I hadn't realized was closed. He hesitated only briefly, before a small smile touched his lips. Well, since you asked. The flow of Idessen, just like that, our dialogue continued, flowing more naturally this time. We discussed literature, certainly, but it wasn't merely about plots and characters. It was about the concepts they ignited, the emotions they evoked, the questions they left lingering. He spoke with earnestness, a surprising depth of thought that I found captivating. He shared his concerns about the demands of his high-pressure career, the sensation of being a minor component in an enormous system, and his quiet longing to pursue something more meaningful, something that mattered, though he wasn't entirely certain what that might be. Yet, I truly listened perhaps more attentively than I had listened to anyone in quite some time. There was no hidden agenda, no pressure to provide solutions or guidance, just the simple act of hearing another person's thoughts, their quiet aspirations and concerns. Listening in his words, I discovered echoes of my own younger self, that period of exploration and questioning that seems to diminish with life's routines and obligations. He asked me questions too about Harold, about my children, about what it was like growing up in a different generation. He wasn't merely being courteous. There was genuine curiosity in his voice, a sincere desire to understand. I found myself sharing memories I hadn't spoken of in years, recollections that lay dormant beneath the surface of daily life. I spoke about my early aspirations of becoming a teacher, a passion I'd set aside when family responsibilities took precedence. I even admitted my secret fondness for classic mystery novels, the kind with intricate plots and clever detectives. You wanted to be a teacher? He asked, his expression thoughtful. Why didn't you return to it later, after your children were independent? The question was direct but not unkind. I paused, gazing out the window at the now peacefully feeding finches. Life, I suppose, I said with a gentle sigh. It has a way of setting you on one course, and sometimes you forget there were other possibilities you once wanted to pursue, and then it simply feels too late. I don't believe it's ever too late to pursue a possibility, Eleanor, Nathan said softly, his gaze steady on mine. Perhaps just in a different form. His words, so simple, so sincere, landed with unexpected impact. It wasn't a glitch. It felt like a genuine conviction he was sharing with me. And in that moment, looking at this young man, my neighbor's son whom I'd only known as a child from next door, I felt a connection that was as surprising as it was meaningful. The quiet revelation shock wasn't a dramatic event, no thunderclap or sudden epiphany. It was a gentler thing, a gradual awakening. The revelation was recognizing how much common understanding could exist in the most unexpected places, with the most unlikely people. It was the surprise of being truly understood and of understanding someone else, perhaps genuinely. For the first time, the afternoon was progressing, the light outside turning golden, and I knew this conversation was something special, something I wouldn't easily forget. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed for a soft, resonant sound that seemed to mark a transition in the afternoon's gentle rhythm. Nathan glanced toward the sound, a flicker of awareness in his eyes as if remembering that time beyond this kitchen was still advancing. Time's passage already for a clock, he said with a note of surprise. I should probably let you return to your day. I've monopolized so much of your time. Not at all, Nathan, I said, and it was the most honest thing I'd expressed all day. This has been, well, it's been a genuine pleasure. I truly mean that. The mountain of books in my study was completely forgotten, replaced by a feeling of lightness, of unexpected fellowship. He stood, and I did as well. For a moment, we simply remained there beside the table, the remnants of our tea and conversation lingering in the warm air between us. There was a comfortable silence, not awkward, but one that acknowledged something meaningful had transpired between us. Thank you again for the tea, Eleanor, he said, his earlier shyness replaced by warm sincerity. And for the conversation. It's not every day you get to discuss Elizabeth Bennet and dystopian futures with someone who truly understands. I smiled. The pleasure was entirely mine, Nathan. It's encouraging to know there are still people reading the meaningful books and thinking the profound thoughts. Future possibility. She picked up Pride and Prejudice from the table, holding it momentarily. You know, he said, examining the worn cover, I have several books at my parents' house, some you might enjoy. Classic science fiction mostly, but the kind that really provokes thought, as you mentioned. Perhaps I could bring them by sometime, if you'd be interested. The offer was casual, yet it felt like more than mere politeness. It was an opening, a possibility for future conversations, and I found myself, to my own surprise, genuinely hoping he would follow through. I'd like that very much, Nathan, I said. I'm always seeking new old books, if that makes sense. He grinned. Perfect sense. To me. He moved toward the hallway, and I accompanied him. At the front door, he paused, turning to face me. The afternoon light from the side windows illuminated his features, highlighting the earnestness in those green eyes. Feeling adrift? Seriously, Eleanor, he said, his voice slightly lower, more earnest. Thank you. I've been feeling somewhat adrift lately. My job is adequate, pays the expenses, but sometimes I question what the purpose of it all is. You know, speaking with you today, it helped. It made me feel more anchored. His admission, so open and vulnerable, touched me profoundly. Here was this young man at the threshold of his life, wrestling with the same existential questions that people of all ages face, and he was sharing that with me, a woman who had been practically a stranger to him an hour earlier. It was a gift. That kind of trust. Nathan, I said, my voice equally gentle. We all feel adrift sometimes, regardless of our age. The important thing is to continue seeking those moments of connection, those conversations that make us feel grounded. They exist, sometimes in the most unexpected places. I smiled, thinking of how this ordinary Wednesday had become anything but ordinary. A meeting of minds. She met my gaze, a look of profound understanding passing between us. It wasn't a romantic connection, not in any traditional sense. It was something else, something perhaps rarer and in its own way more precious. It was a meeting of minds, a recognition of shared humanity, a moment of genuine empathy that transcended age and circumstance. This was the true shock, the beautiful, quiet surprise of it all. The world suddenly felt a little less chaotic, a little more hopeful. I'll see you around, Eleanor, he said, opening the door. You too, Nathan. And give my regards to your mother, I replied. He nodded, offered a small wave, and then he was gone, walking down my front steps and across the street. I watched him for a moment, a tall, thoughtful figure disappearing into the familiar landscape of our neighborhood, a landscape that somehow appeared slightly different now, enriched with a new layer of meaning. Closing reflections. I closed the door slowly, leaning against it briefly. The kitchen was quiet again, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of the neighborhood. The scent of tea still lingered, but now it was mixed with the fainter, more intangible aroma of shared thoughts and unexpected kinship. I returned to the kitchen, my gaze falling on the two empty teacups still on the table. Such ordinary objects, yet they felt like artifacts from a significant encounter. I hadn't conquered the mountain of books in the study. I hadn't completed any of the tasks I'd planned. Instead, I had stumbled into something far more enriching. I had connected with another human being on a level I hadn't anticipated, and it had awakened something within me, something that had been dormant too long. It was a feeling of vitality, of curiosity, of renewed wonder about the world and the people in it. My neighbor's son had come to return a book, and in doing so, he had returned a piece of myself to me. The garden view. He walked to the window above the sink, looking out at my small garden. The petunias were blazing purple in the late afternoon sun. Harold had always loved petunias. He'd said they were like tiny fireworks, even on overcast days. For a long time after he passed, looking at them had brought a sharp pang of sadness, but today they simply looked vibrant, cheerful, full of life. Nathan's words about it never being too late to explore a possibility, even in a different form, echoed in my mind. My old dream of teaching. It wasn't about standing before a classroom anymore. Perhaps it was about something simpler. Maybe it was about sharing knowledge in smaller ways, about paying attention, truly paying attention to the world around me, to the quiet dramas and unexpected connections that unfold every day, even in a peaceful neighborhood circle. I thought about our conversation, the ease with which we'd transitioned from polite pleasantries to deeper reflections. There had been no pretense, no awkwardness, just a natural unfolding. It was a reminder that genuine connection doesn't require grand gestures or dramatic events. Sometimes it's as simple as two people sharing a cup of tea and a willingness to listen, truly listen. The initial shock, I'd mentally noted, wasn't about scandal or drama, but the profound realization of how easily we can misjudge or overlook the people around us, even those we encounter regularly. Nathan wasn't just Margaret and David's boy anymore. He was a thoughtful, searching individual with a rich inner life, someone capable of deep conversation and surprising insights. And perhaps, in his eyes, I wasn't just Mrs. Patterson, the quiet widow from next door. Perhaps he saw something more as well. That evening, instead of turning on the television out of habit, I found myself retrieving an old, empty journal and a pen. The ink flowed surprisingly smoothly. I didn't write about grand philosophies or attempt to solve the world's problems. I simply wrote about the afternoon, about the sunlight in the kitchen, the smell of tea and vanilla, the earnest look in a young man's eyes as he discussed books and dreams, and the search for meaning. I described how our conversation had meandered like a gentle river, touching unexpected shores. It felt wonderful to write, to translate those thoughts and feelings into words. It was like exploring one of those forgotten possibilities Nathan had mentioned, not a path back to an old dream perhaps, but a new path. One that felt uniquely my own. Personal discovery. Realized that the personal discovery wasn't just about seeing Nathan differently. It was about seeing myself differently too. I wasn't merely a collection of past roles: wife, mother, widow. I was still Eleanor, a person capable of new connections, new thoughts, new growth. The encounter had been brief, just a few hours on an ordinary Wednesday, but its ripples continued to spread. It had nudged me out of a comfortable, perhaps to quiet routine. It had reminded me of the joy of intellectual companionship, the spark that comes from a meeting of minds. And it had done so with such mutual respect, such a gentle unfolding of shared vulnerability. A few days later, I encountered Margaret, Nathan's mother, at the market. "Eleanor," she exclaimed, "Nathan mentioned he had such a lovely visit with you recently. He really enjoyed your tea and your company. He even said you discussed some of those serious books he's fond of." She beamed. "It's so wonderful to see him connecting with people. He can be quite reserved, you know." I smiled. "He's a remarkable young man, Margaret. You and David should be very proud," and I meant it. He was proof that thoughtfulness and depth weren't lost qualities. The world might be noisy, as I'd said to him, but there were still quiet spaces, quiet conversations, where real understanding could flourish. The Gift Me Little kitchen had been one of them that Wednesday afternoon. I didn't know if Nathan would bring over those science fiction books he'd mentioned. It didn't really matter in the larger picture. What mattered was the experience itself, the unexpected gift of that afternoon. It had been a reminder that life, even in its quieter chapters, could still hold surprises, still offer moments of profound connection and personal growth. It had shocked me, yes, but in the most wonderful way. It had awakened me slightly, reminded me to keep my own doors and my mind open, and for that, I was incredibly grateful. The book he'd returned was about pride and understanding, and in a small, personal way, our conversation had been about that too, about seeing each other clearly and connecting with respect and an open heart. And that, I thought, was a story worth treasuring.